everyone. Hello, hello. Welcome to my third session of being absolutely honored to speak with everyone with Lupus LA about nutrition and all of the recommendations that I make for eating well with lupus. So if you missed the first two, this is the third of three sessions. And we discussed a couple different components of this. So I would recommend going back, catching the first two videos. They are all on Lupus LA video docket. So you can just scroll down and see the past ones. Besides my content, Lupus LA has amazing other videos. So you can find a lot of fantastic content that you'll probably want to maybe watch a bunch of videos. But welcome today. My name is Tanya Freirich. I am a registered dietitian. I go by the name the Lupus Dietician because I not only help people with lupus, I have lupus myself. I have had it for quite a few years and use my personal experience living through lupus. The first year or two, I really had terrible flares on top of a lifetime of other autoimmune diseases. And utilizing my understanding of dietary, nutrition, science, and lifestyle changes have been able to really quiet down my symptoms. I have been in remission for 6.5 years now. And of course, I want to share that knowledge and my expertise with as many people as possible. So everyone that I come in contact with that has lupus can hopefully, after speaking with me, feel a little bit better, at least, if not a lot better. So today we are going to talk about superfoods, foods that are particularly nutritious, things that you can incorporate in your diet in small amounts, big amounts, and they make a big difference. But just to recap, the things that we talked about in particular that really correlate with the superfoods, last week we talked about dietary triggers. So I did just want to briefly go over that again. So dietary triggers, there's a couple that are very specific for lupus and then quite a few that increase inflammation. Today, then, we're going to talk about the other side of that coin, the superfoods and the foods that reduce inflammation. So we'll start with the things to be a little bit mindful of, maybe more careful of. Make sure that if you are consuming them, maybe try to consume a little bit less. Or perhaps if you are actively trying to avoid them, I can have a gentle reminder of where you can find those foods. So maybe taking another look at what you're eating and see if any of those things are kind of hidden away. So the first one is tartrazine. It is yellow number 5. It's a food coloring. So it may be found in foods that the manufacturer is trying to turn like a yellow or an orange or a red color. Candies certainly have it. Cereals, anything that's kind of a vibrant hue, they're usually adding food coloring. And unfortunately, they're not always adding things like beet juice for turning it red or other natural things. So yellow number 5 is something to keep an eye out for. If you can find foods that don't have it in there, there has been very good research about yellow number 5 as a trigger for lupus symptoms. So let's try to avoid that if you can. Another kind of trigger, not only for people with lupus, but everyone, are highly processed foods. So that would be, let's say, something that can stay on the shelf for a very, very long time. Maybe a TV dinner where you have a protein, a starch, the vegetables, a bunch of sauces, and usually they add a fair amount of preservatives. Canned foods sometimes have a lot of things added to it, boxed foods. So always just give a look over the ingredients list. If there's a lot of things that you're pretty unfamiliar with, maybe there's something that's a little bit less processed that could be a better choice. Another thing that is specific for I'm sorry, there's a message coming in. I just want to make sure that the technology is working, that everyone can hear me really well. Okay, good. And so another thing that's specific for lupus is called alfalfa sprouts. Sometimes you can find them canned, sometimes they are fresh and added on top of food or as part of dishes in quite a few different dishes and different cuisines. So unfortunately, there is a component in alfalfa sprouts that can be triggering for lupus symptoms or for people with lupus to not feel so great. So if you can avoid the tartrazine or yellow number 5 and the alfalfa, that's specific for lupus. Now, I will say one trigger that's kind of on the fence. Some people I have found with lupus are very triggered by this food, and some people tolerate it very well and actually benefit from the antioxidant components of it, and that is garlic. So I always put kind of a little asterisk on garlic of try it out, talk to your doctor, see how you feel, consume it, maybe take a break from it for a little while, and see if you're one of those people that is bothered by it or one of those people that benefits from it. Because I would not say a blanket statement for everyone to avoid garlic. Okay, other dietary triggers that are beneficial for a lot of people to avoid would be things that are very high in saturated fat. So, for example, consuming a lot of fried foods, especially things like animal products, butter, lard. These are the sorts of fats that may not be terrible on their own. It's really kind of the dose makes the poison. If you're having it here and there, fine. But if you're consuming a lot of these and your diet surrounding those saturated fats is very low in things like vegetables, fresh fruits, the healthier fats, then your fat intake may just be off kilter. And actually, most Americans have a lot of omega-6s and saturated fats in their diet. And omega-6s come from the vegetable oils, and then the saturated fats generally are coming from animal sources, that they're just off balance. And so we'll talk about one of the superfoods to get you back on balance is omega-3s, which are a different type of fat and a different type of specifically unsaturated fat. So we'll talk about that soon. Other things that can be inflammatory: excessive sugar intake, especially, let's say, very processed sugars. So there is a bit of a difference of consuming, let's say, a teaspoon of honey in a cup of tea or with your yogurt or in some oatmeal versus consuming a lot of sodas and juices, things like high fructose corn syrup, and artificial sweeteners. So we'll touch upon it very soon. I know I'm giving you a lot of teasers, but I do want it all to connect for people. So artificial sweeteners, unfortunately, are not great for our gut microbiome. And so when we consume too much of those, then our gut health is hindered, or it's a little bit detrimental to our gut health. So then we want the superfoods, or the foods that reduce the inflammation, to help also have a happy gut. So we want the good bacteria to be plentiful. And then there's a kind of a couple different things that really, again, it's so individual. Lupus has 1,000 million faces. Everyone with lupus has a slightly different symptom profile, different reaction, different timeline of what parts of their bodies have been affected by lupus, but also what changes work for people. So some of the other foods that sometimes are helpful for people to eliminate, sometimes may not. And this is when I always suggest you talk to your doctor, you talk to a registered dietitian to make sure that you're having the support you need, would be things like perhaps gluten or dairy or soy. These are foods that are on the top allergen lists for everyone. These are major allergens, but also for some people with autoimmune disease, they may be triggering. But again, get individualized help. Please don't just do everything all at once and not know what to eat and to be depriving yourself. You are setting yourself up to, one, be really, really frustrated, and two, maybe not get the best results. because we want to feel better, right? Okay, so let's get on to today's topic. We reviewed last week or 2 weeks ago, last topic, and now we'll talk about those superfoods and how to reduce the inflammation. So I'll kind of posit it as, well, here's the food that we want to eliminate. What can we replace it with? So thankfully, yellow number 5 really isn't necessary in our diet, but it is a bright yellow hue. So what can we put in our diet that's really great for us, that's maybe yellow and orange and red? And so some of those foods, for example, would be fresh fruits. They could include berries, like strawberries are that nice color red. Apples can be that orange and red. That family, so eating the rainbow actually is guaranteeing, if you're eating all the different colors of vegetables and fruits, that you're getting different nutrient profiles in those foods. So the yellow, the orange, the red, that's kind of one area of the rainbow where you could be getting different nutrients. So for example, vitamin C could be in that grouping of fruits and vegetables, lycopene, vitamin A, quercetin is found in apples, for example, and berries. So there's different very, very helpful nutrients, antioxidants, phytochemicals, vitamins that are in that group. So we've kicked yellow 5 to the curb, and now we have those fresh fruits and vegetables, particularly that are yellow and orange and red. Okay, so how about alfalfa sprouts? Now we're trying to avoid those, but in its place, you could certainly do any sort of leafy greens. Kale has certainly had its moment in the sun, but you do not only have to eat kale. You can have spinach, collard greens, mustard greens. There's so many out there. Arugula, mustard greens. Romaine is fine. Sometimes people kind of pish-posh on romaine, but there's plenty of nutrition in all of these leafy greens. It's great to have a variety. The only, again, little asterisk that I would put with leafy greens is that if you are on the medication, sometimes people call it Coumadin, sometimes people refer to it as warfarin, then you do want to be careful with your leafy green intake because it is a very fantastic, rich source of vitamin K, but that can interact with your medication. So leafy greens help with clotting. If you already have a problem with clotting and you're on something like warfarin, also known as Coumadin, to help with your clotting, then you're putting your diet at odds with your medical care. So, of course, talk to your doctor, talk to your dietitian, make sure that those changes are cohesive with the rest of your care. Okay, so now talking about, again, getting rid of some of those triggers, and then what do we replace it with? I touched upon saturated fats. I gave you the little teaser. Okay, what do we do for better fats? So if we're replacing something like, let's say, butter in your diet and you wanted to increase your intake of both the omega-9s and the omega-3s, then you could increase those unsaturated fats, which are those healthy fats. We need more of them. We need the seesaw to go up in that direction. You could increase your intake of things like avocado oil, olive oil, avocados, walnuts, fatty fish. So that would be salmon, tuna. We don't want to overdo the amount just because it's a higher mercury fish, but tuna, sardines, anchovies, herring, and there's quite many other fish. So you can always look up what are the fish highest in omega-3s and see if anything else is on there that you enjoy. I mentioned walnuts and also ground flax seeds. So that is a fantastic source of not only omega-3s, but protein, fiber, and if you wanted to just get the omega-3 benefit and not the protein or the fiber of the actual ground flaxseed, you can always do flaxseed oil. However, flaxseed oil is a very low smoke point. That means you can't heat it very high. In fact, maybe just warm it or use it as a salad dressing or a topper at the end of preparation of your meal so that it doesn't start to degrade. Also, if you are buying flaxseed, I mentioned ground flaxseed, and I did so on purpose because if you're consuming the whole flax seeds, you actually, we can't break into that seed. It's too small or too difficult in terms of the outer casing for our body to break into it. And small, I meant by chewing. So it would be difficult to really masticate it down to a puree or to a powder. And without it being ground, then you're not getting all of those omega-3s. Certainly you'll get fiber, but it helps when it's ground. It provides a lot more nutrition to you. Your body can absorb so much more of the benefits. So please buy a ground. Another really popular one right now is chia seeds, and those are a great source of omega-3s. They also give you fiber and protein. So that's kind of the healthy fats superfood area to pay attention to. The other sorts of things that we can add into our diet that are kind of filling out that rainbow would be cruciferous vegetables. So those would be green. You can certainly find white cauliflower or purple cauliflower, but cruciferous vegetables do have antioxidants. They are very anti-inflammatory, so they can help reduce the inflammation. I'm sure you've seen on maybe every list of superfoods ever, broccoli usually has a spot, and it's for good reason. But if you don't like broccoli or cauliflower, you could always do Brussels sprouts. There's more in that family, so don't feel kind of pigeonholed. Oh, I have to eat broccoli. There's other things in the cruciferous family. Okay, so now we've spoken about all of those. How about we talk about, instead of excessive sugar, how else can we flavor our food in a way that can reduce inflammation? So certainly I tell people try to stay away from the artificial sweeteners. If you can do, let's say, a little bit of brown sugar or honey, maple syrup, molasses, all of those retain some of the benefits from that thing at the beginning. So it's less processed. For example, if you get local honey, that can actually have benefits for your seasonal allergies too. Especially, I just spoke with a beekeeper at the farmer's market this past week, and you can tell what I do on my weekends, about the honeys and the difference between each type and which one helps the most with seasonal allergies. And so he was telling me locally, well, if you have a family member that's dealing with seasonal allergies, thankfully I don't have seasonal allergies, but I know people that do. You could always go with Wildflower Honey. That is something that really helps because it's almost like a little inoculation of the pollen. So then you build up more of an immunity to it and hopefully less allergies. So anyway, that's something nice about honey that you're certainly not going to get from high fructose corn syrup. Other ways to flavor your food, using kind of superfoods, spices, or roots, things like turmeric and ginger are fantastic. Super anti-inflammatory. I love the taste. If you can find turmeric or ginger in whole, fresh form, usually at international markets or just a bigger supermarket, sometimes they'll have it fresh. I like to peel it and then dice it, or use the peeler to make little strips and use it in my cooking. It flavors it wonderfully. You can also make it into a tea. You could be trendy and make yourself a turmeric latte, or they called it a golden milk latte these days. Whatever you enjoy. I mean, at the end of the day, the most important thing is to incorporate these superfoods and foods that reduce inflammation in ways that you enjoy. That's kind of a bigger topic, but forcing yourself to eat something because you know it's good for you is really only going to last so long. If you can incorporate those foods because you know that they're good for you, but also in a way that you really enjoy, it's going to be so much easier to stick with that. And there is something to be said about the mental benefits of consuming a food that you enjoy versus forcing it down because you know you should or you think it's going to help you. Our body and our mind is very interconnected, so having the enjoyment of the food is also really important. Okay, so the other sorts of inflammatory foods or sorts of things that perhaps we should avoid are those things that aren't so great for our gut microbiome. So I mentioned gluten. Again, this is not a coverall for everyone. Gluten may not be a trigger for you. It may be a trigger for other people. But gluten, those artificial sweeteners, other things could contribute to basically a couple different things going wrong in our gut. So unfortunately, if we're consuming a food that our body doesn't really like, it can cause something called leaky gut. I know I explained this before, but basically it's when those junctions of your gut cells are not so tight anymore and they're a little bit loose. This can be problematic because now bigger particles are coming into your body in a way that they are not meant to. Another component that we want to be careful with is keeping the gut bacteria healthy. And artificial sweeteners are one way that it really puts our body into a less healthy state. So when we're consuming lots of fresh things, lots of foods that are anti-inflammatory, and some of these superfoods, for example, probiotics, prebiotics, fermented foods are a great source of probiotics. All of these help your gut microbiome. Now, in terms of the leaky gut, where your cell junctures are not as tight as they should be, things like bone broth and collagen can help you there. So, talking about those foods, fermented foods could be things like kimchi, sauerkraut, fufu. There's a lot of fermented drinks in each culture. Kefir is one that's certainly more available on American grocery store shelves. Kombucha, the apple cider vinegar with the mother. These are all things that are fermented. Pickled foods. What else? Yogurt if you're consuming dairy. So there's a lot of options out there. Again, please eat what you enjoy. Please don't force yourself to eat something that you hate. It won't last. You won't be able to do it for very long, and it's not really giving you that long lasting benefit. But anyway, those are probiotics. Prebiotics, for example, are a certain type of fiber. One of the easiest things to find them in is basically the entire family of onions. So shallots, white onions, red onions, green onions, scallions. There's that whole family. That is a great source of those prebiotic fiber. And prebiotic fiber is basically probiotics' favorite food. They just love it. It helps all that healthy bacteria grow and flourish and kind of scoot out the bad bacteria. So you're putting, just as we talked about the fats where we want to decrease the less healthy ones and increase your more healthy ones, we want to decrease the not so great bad bacteria that's in our digestive system, particularly large intestines, which is your colon, and then increase the good bacteria. So we want the seesaw to go more on the side that's helpful for you. Just another touch upon bone broth and collagen. This is another food that's become very trendy lately. You can certainly find it in a million different ways in terms of powders and supplements and pills and electrolyte mixes. Bone broth is something that you can make 100% on your own. You do not need to buy very much of anything. You could, let's say if you've purchased something like a chicken, you can use those bones. Usually when people make something like chicken soup, you're leaving the bones in for a very long time. So you're extracting the collagen from those bones. You could buy from a butcher beef bones and then cook them for a very long time. If you have something like an Instapot, you can pressure cook them, you can slow cook them. Basically, you just want them to really, really be in that heat for a long time to be able to extract as much collagen as possible. It is, one of my favorite things to drink if I don't feel so great. I have given it to literally all of my family members if they're ever under the weather. Here, take some bone broth. It just is one of those things that almost immediately makes you feel better. You can also really spice it up. So you could put in some vegetables, carrots, onions, celery, whatever flavor that you really like. Ginger and turmeric, you can throw those in there. So that's a really nice way to make it really savory. So bone broth, definitely is a collagen boosting way. Some of those collagen powders are also made from marine bones. And if you ever make a fish soup where you're actually putting in the fish, you're achieving the same thing. Oftentimes, bone broth, if you're just having the bones versus the soup, you may just cook the bones much, much longer than you would cook the soup, unless you like to cook your soup for a very, very long time. So I think we have covered, and I always want to leave room for questions. You guys come with great questions. Um, yeah, I covered my list. I mean, there's always so much more, but I do want to make sure those are kind of like the big ticket items in terms of things that make a big difference. There's always more that you can do, like nuts and seeds, other types of vegetables. Okay, so I see some questions here. So do you recommend we take prebiotics and probiotics? That is a great question. So you do want the balance. Before you start any supplements, you've heard it before, I'll say it again, talk to your doctor, talk to your dietitian, talk to your pharmacist. Make sure it's in coherence with the rest of your diet plan, your medication plan, your current just care plan in general. I certainly wouldn't want anyone having any ill effects of changing things. But yes, the combination of two are fantastic and will get you better results. I see another question. What is a sugar substitute or sweetener that's good for us? That's a great question. I always kind of err on the side of the less processed, the more natural, the better. Also, I have found with counseling people over very many years, thousands and thousands of people that I've counseled, that if you taper down how much sweetener you need, you may find over time your taste buds change, that you actually don't need quite as much as you did at the beginning. Artificial sweeteners are very sweet, like 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 the sweetness of something like brown sugar or honey. So if you can just taper down how much you need at all, try to use the natural sweeteners as little as possible. That's a really good way to just not need that much in your life. Then you have room for the other things that are really reducing the inflammation and boosting you in a different way. If I were to say, okay, every once in a while have some sort of artificial sweetener, there's a lot out there. Sugar alcohols like erythritol. Honestly, they can cause a little bit of digestive distress if you're consuming too much of them, but do with that what you will. Monk fruit certainly exists. There's options, and I would, again, just use as little as possible because it's still not going to be something that is boosting you up that much. Whereas if you're eating fresh fruits or fresh vegetables, or fresh fruits probably the best example for sweetness, then you're getting so much more out of that bite. More questions? Oh, great question. So, are there any safe omega-3 oil supplements, or is it better to eat the fish? Great question to talk to your pharmacist and your doctor about in terms of specific brands. I also err on the side of, you know, when a fish is bad, it smells. You're not going to eat it. Excuse me. But it's a little bit harder to tell when a supplement is, let's say, past its best buy date, or maybe getting a little too old. Maybe it's been degraded. You can't tell that from a capsule. Also, unfortunately, our supplement market is, let's say, could be better regulated in terms of there could be more oversight and testing to make sure what the company says they put in the supplement, they've actually put in the supplement. It's not a perfect industry. So if you like fatty fish and you wanted to include salmon, let's say twice a week, or sardines more often, because sardines are very low in mercury, so you can actually have them quite frequently. That could be a way to get in omega-3s without having to depend on a supplement and worry, is it bad, is it good? And then vegan omega-3 supplements, great question. So you could use flaxseed oil, you could fill up on ground flax seeds and chia seeds and walnuts. Those are vegan sources of omega-3s too. Oh, and someone mentioned that dates are great for sweetness. That is very true. Dates, are great, especially if you're doing something like an energy bite recipe. I don't know if you all have ever tried energy bites. They're basically like almost making little granola bars, but more moist. And you could use dates, nut butters, chopped nuts, other dried fruit if you don't like dates. Ground flaxseed or chia seeds could go in there. And oats are often added to give it a little bit of something to hold on to and keep it together. But those are almost like little mini dessert bites, but made out of all things that at least give you another bonus in different ways. And you could use honey in there or the dates. And those are some all natural ways to get yummy sweetness in your diet. Let's see if we have any other questions. Oh, great question. So, do I ever recommend that lupus patients do an elimination diet to see if we react to things like lectins, or just use a food journal? Fantastic question. So this is what I work on with people, because there is no one size fits all. So actually, if you were looking for a dietitian, I mean, my company is the Lupus Dietician. I help people with lupus figure this stuff out. It's really overwhelming. I did my undergraduate, my master's in nutrition. I've been doing this for more than a decade. So I'm sure that everyone out there, you have your own strengths. Figuring out all of this nutrition stuff from scratch probably is not how you want to spend your time. So if you ever need help, please reach out to me. Of course, you can find me anywhere, the Lupus Dietitian, Instagram, Facebook. Once in a while, I put on a TikTok. My website is thelupusdietitian.com. So if you're looking for guidance for you particularly, please reach out. I certainly would absolutely love to help anyone and everyone that needs help in this area, because it's tough. I don't always recommend an elimination diet. I don't always recommend a food journal, because we're all complicated people. Some people may be coming to me with a little bit of a complicated relationship with food, and starting something like that could be more problematic for them. So of course, every single person deserves the best approach, and that's what I work with people. Let me see, lots of questions coming in. Oh, someone's mentioning a nice recipe. It looks for a vegan creamer. Dates, almond milk, overnight soaked cashews, and a little bit of vanilla make a nice vegan creamer. That's great. There's also flaxseed milk on the market these days. That one's a new addition, and then that's a good way to get those omega-3s in. And it is non-dairy. All right. Well, I think I'm breezing through. I think I've seen all of the questions and answered all of them. Thank you so much again for your attention. I know I just gave my contact information. It will also be posted. If you're ever looking for one-on-one nutrition help or group nutrition help, I help people in a lot of different ways, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram and my website. It's all the Lupus Dietitian or on Facebook or Instagram, etc. The Lupus Dietitian is how you will find me. I wish you all an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining, and enjoy the rest of your summer. Thank you. Take care.